Atomic Habits, Tiny Changes, Remarkable Results. An essay and proven way to build good habits, break bad habits by James Clear. Chapter 1, Why Tiny Changes Make a Big Difference. First one, the surprising power of atomic habits. Introduction, my story. On the final day of my sophomore year of high school, I was hit in the face with the baseball bat. As my classmate took a full swing, the bat slipped out of his hands and came flying towards me before striking me directly between the eyes. I have no memory of the moment of impact. The bat smashed into my face with such a force that it crushed my nose into a distorted U-shape. The collision sent the soft tissue of my brain slamming into the inside of my skull. Immediately, a wave of swelling surged throughout my head in a fraction of a second. I had a broken nose, multiple skull fractures, and 2 shattered eye sockets. When I opened my eyes, I saw people staring at me and running over to help. I looked down and noticed a spot of red on my clothes, and one of my classmates took the shirt off his back and handed it to me. I used it to plug the stream of blood rushing from my broken nose. Shocked and confused, I was unaware of how seriously I had been injured. My teacher looped his arm around my shoulder and we began the long walk to the nurse's office, across the field, down the hill and back into school. A random hand touched my side, holding me upright. We took our time and walked slowly. Nobody realized that every minute mattered. When we arrived at the nurse's office, she asked me a series of questions. What years is it? 1998, I answered. It was actually 2002. Who is the President of the United States? Bill Clinton, I said. The correct answer was George W. Bush. What is your mom's name? I still 10 seconds passed. Patty said. I said casually, ignoring the fact that it has taken me to 10 seconds to remember my own mother's name. And that is the last question I remember. My body was unable to handle the rapid swelling in my brain, and I lost the consciousness before the ambulance arrived. A minute later, I was carried out of the school and taken to the local hospital. Short after arriving, my body began shutting down and I struggled with the basic functions like swelling and the breathing. I had my first seizures of the day, and then I stopped breathing entirely. As the doctors hurried to supply me with oxygen, they also decided the local hospital was unequipped to handle the situations and ordered the helicopter to fly me to the largest hospital in Cincinnati. I was rolled out of the emergency room doors and towards the helipad across the street. The stretcher rattled on the bumpy sidewalks as one nurse pushed me along while another pumped me each breath into me by hand. My mother, who had arrived at the hospital a few moments before, climbed into the helicopter beside me. I remained unconscious and unable to breathe on my own as she held my hands during the flight. While my mother rode with me in the helicopter. My father went home to check on my brothers and sister and break the news to them. He choked back tears as they explained to my sister that he would miss her 18th grade graduation ceremony that night. After passing my siblings off to my family and friends, he drove to Chennai City to meet my mother. When my mom and I landed on the roof of the hospital, a team of nearly 20 doctors and nurses sprinted into the helipad and wheeled me into the trauma unit. By this time, the swelling in my brain had become so severe that I was having repeated post-traumatic seizures. My broken bones needed to be fixed, but I was in no condition to undergo surgery. After yet another seizure, my third of the day, I was put into medically induced coma and placed on a ventilator. My parents were no strangers to this hospital. 10 years earlier, they had entered the same building on the ground floor after my sister was diagnosed with leukemia at age 3. I was 5 at that time, and my brother was just 6 months old. After 2.5 years of xenotherapy treatments, spinal taps, and bone marrow bypasses, my little sister finally walked out of the hospital happy, healthy, and cancer-free. And now, after 10 years of normal life, my parents found themselves back in the same place with a different child. While I slipped into the coma, the hospital sent a priest and a social worker to comfort my parents. It was the same priest who had met with them at the site earlier on the evening. They found out my sister had cancer. As day faded into night, a series of machines kept me alive. My parents slept restlessly on the hospital mattress. One moment they would collapse from fatigue, and next day would be wide awake with worry. My mother would tell me later, it was one of the worst nights I have ever had. My recovery. Mercifully, by the next morning, my breathing had rebounded to the point where the doctor felt comfortable releasing me from the coma. When I finally regained consciousness, I discovered that I had lost my ability to smell. As a test, a nurse asked me to blow my nose and sniff an apple juice box. My sense of smell returned, but to everyone's surprise, the act of blowing my nose forced air through the fractures in my eyes socket and pushed my left eye outwards. My eyeball bulged out of the socket, held precisely in the place by my eyelids and optic nerves attaching my eyes to my brain. The ophthalmologist said my eyes would gradually slide back into the place as the air seeped out. But it was hard to tell how long this would take. I was scheduled for surgery 1 week later, which would allow me to some additional time to heal. And I looked like I had been on the wrong of the boxing match, but I was cleared to leave the hospital. I returned home with a broken nose, half a dozen facial fractures, and bulging left eyes. The following months were hard. It feels like everything in my life was on pause. I had double visions for a week. I literally could not see straight. It took more than a month, but my eyeball did eventually return to its normal location. Between the seizures and my vision problem, it was 8 months before I could drive a car again at physical therapy. I practiced basic motor pattern like walking in a straight line. I was determined not to let my injury get me down. My but there were more than a few moments when I felt depressed and overwhelmed. I became painfully aware of how far I had to go when I returned to the baseball field 1 year later. Baseball had always been a major part of my life. My dad had played minor league baseball for Street Place Cardinals, and I had a dream of playing professionally too. After months of rehabilitation, what I wanted more than anything was to get back on the field. But my return to baseball was not smooth. When the season rolled around, I was the only junior to be cut from the varsity baseball team. I was sent down to play with the sophomores on injury varsity. I had been playing since age 4, and for someone who had spent so much time and effort on the sports, getting cut was humiliating. I vividly remember the day it happened. I sat in my car and cried as I flipped through the radio, desperately searching for a song that would make me feel better. After a year of self-doubt, I managed to make the varsity team as a senior, but I rarely made it on the field. In total, I played 11 innings of high school varsity baseball, barely more than a single game. Despite my lackluster high school career, I still believed I could become a great player. And I knew that if things were going to improve, I was the one responsible for making it happen. The turning point came 2 years after my injury when I began college at Denison University. It was new beginning, and it was the place where I would discover the surprising power of small habits for the first time. How I learned about habits. Attending Denison was one of the best decisions of my life. I earned a spot on the baseball team, and although I was at the bottom of the roster as the freshman, I was thrilled. Despite the chaos of my high school years, I had managed to become a college athlete. I was not going to be starting on the baseball team anytime soon, so I focused on getting my life on order while my peers stayed up late and played video games. I built good sleep habits and went to bed early each night. In the messy world of the college dorms, I made a point to keep my room neat and tidy. These improvements were minor, but they gave me a sense of control over my life. I started to feel confident again, and this growing belief in myself rippled into the classroom as I improved my study habits and managed to earn a straight A's during my first years. A habit is routine or behavior that performed regularly and in many cases automatically. As each semester passed, I accumulated a small but consistent habits that ultimately led to results that were unimaginable to me when I started. For example, for my first time in my life, I made it a habit to lift weight multiple times per week. And in the years that followed, my 6 foot 4 inch friend bulked up from a featherweight 170 to lean 200 pounds. When my sophomore seasons arrived, I earned a starting role on the pitching staff. My by my junior years, I was voted team captain, and at the end of the season, I was selected for the all-conference team. But it was not until my senior season that my sleep habits, study habits, and strength training habits really began to pay off. 6 years later, after I had been hit in the face with the baseball bat, flown to the hospital, and placed into a coma, I was selected as the top male athlete at Denison University and named to the ESPN Academic All-America team. An honor given to just 33 players across the country. By the time I graduated, I was listed in the school record book in the 8 different categories. That same year, I was awarded the university's highest academic honor and President Medal. I hope you will forgive me if this sounds boastful. To be honest, there was nothing legendary or historic about my athlete career. I never ended up playing professionally. However, looking back on those years, I believe I accomplished something just as rare. I fulfilled my potential, and I believe the concept of this book can help you fulfill your potential as well. We all face challenges in life. This injury was one of mine, and the experience taught me a critical lessons. Changes that seem so small and unimportant at the first will compound into remarkable results if you are even willing to stick with them for years. We all deal with setbacks, but at the end, long run quality of our lives often depends on quality of our habits. With the same habits, you will end up with the same results, but with better habits, anything is possible. Maybe there are people who can achieve incredible success overnight. I don't know any of them, and I am certainly not one of them. There wasn't one defining moment on my journey from medically induced coma to academic All-American. There were many. It was a gradual evaluation, a long series of small wins and tiny breakthroughs. The only way I made progress, the only choice I had, was to start small. And I employed this same strategy a few years later when I started my own business and begins working on this book. How and why I write this book? In November 2012, I began publishing articles at jameskiller.com for years. I had been keeping notes about my personal experiments with habits, and I was finally ready to share some of them publicly. I began to publishing a new article every Monday and Thursday. Within a few months, these simple writing habits led to my first 1000 email subscriber, and by the end of the 2013, that number had grown to my more than 30,000 people. In 2014, my email list expanded to over 100,000 subscribers, which made it one one of the fastest growing newsletters on the internet. I had felt like an imposter when I began writing 2 years earlier, but now I was becoming known as an expert on habits, a new level that excited me but also felt uncomfortable. I had never considered myself a master of the topic, but rather someone who was experimenting alongside my readers. In 2015, I reached 200,000 email subscribers and signed a book deal with the Penguin Random House to begin writing a book you are reading now. And as my audience grew, so did my business opportunities. I was increasingly asked to speak at the top companies about the science of habits formation, behavior change, and continuous improvement. I found myself delivering keynote speeches at the conferences in the United States and Europe. In 2016, my articles began to appear regularly in the major publications like Time, Entrepreneur, and Forbes. Incredibly, my writing was read by over 8 million people that year. Coaches in the NFL, NBA, and MLB began reading my work and sharing it with their team. At the start of 2017, I launched the Habit Academy, which became the premier training program for organizations and individuals interested in the building better habits in life. And Fortune 500 companies and growing startups begins to enroll their leaders and train their staff. In total, over 10,000 leaders, managers, and coaches and teachers have graduated from the Habits Academy, and my work with them has taught me an incredible amount about what it takes to make habits work in the real world. As I put the finishing touches on this book in 2018, jamesclear.com is receiving millions of visitors per month, and nearly 500,000 people subscribe to my weekly email newsletter, a number that is so far beyond my expectations. When I began that, I am not even sure what to think of it. How this book will benefit you. The entrepreneurs and investor Nawal Ravikant has said, to write a great book, you must first become a book. I originally learned about the ideas mentioned here because I had to live them. I had to rely on the small habits to rebound from my injury, to get stronger in the gym, to perform at the high level on the field, to become a writer, to build a successful business, and simply to develop into the responsible adult. A small habits help me fulfill my potential, and since you picked up this book, I am guessing you would like to fulfill yours as well. In the pages that follow, I will share a step-by-step plans for building better habits, not for days or weeks, but for the lifetime. While science supports everything I have written, this book is not an academic research paper, it's an operating manual. You will find wisdom and practical advice front and center as I explained the science of how to create and change your habits in a way that is easy to understand and apply. The field I draw on biology, neuroscience, philosophy, psychology, and more have been around for many years. What I offered you is a synthesis of the best ideas smart people figured out a long time ago, as well as the most compelling discoveries scientists have made recently. My contribution, I hope, is to find the ideas that matters most of and connect them in a way that is highly actionable. Anything wise in these pages you should credit to many experts who preceded me. Anything foolish, assume me, it is my error. The backbone of this book is my 4-step model of habits: cue, craving, response, reward. I repeat, the 4-step model of habits: cue, craving, response, and reward. And the 4 laws of behavior changes that evolve out of these steps. A reader with the psychology background may recognize some of these terms from the operant conditioning, which was first propped as a stimulus response reward by B.F. Skinner in the 1930s and has been popularized more recently cue, routine, reward in The Power of Habits by Charles Duhigg. Behavioral scientists like Skinner realized that if you offered the right rewards or punishment, you could get people to act in a certain way. But while Skinner's model did an excellent job of explaining how external stimulus influenced our habits, it lacked a good explanation for how our thoughts, feelings, and beliefs impact our behavior. Internal states, our moods and emotions matter too. In recent decades, scientists have begun to determine the connection between our thoughts, feelings, and behavior. This research will also be covered in these pages. In total, the framework I offered is an integrated model of the cognitive and behavioral sciences. I believe it is one of the first models of human behavior to accurately account for both the influence of external stimuli and internal emotions on our habits. While some of the languages may be similar, I am confident that the details and the application of the 4 laws of behavior change will offer a new ways to think about your habits. Human behaviors is always changing, situation to situation, moment to moment, second to second. But this book is about what doesn't change. It's about the fundamental of human behavior, the lasting principle you can rely on the years after years. The idea you can build a business around, build a family around, build a life around. There is no one right way to create better habits. But this book describes the best way I know. The approach that will effectively, regardless of where you start or what you are trying to change. The strategies I cover will be relevant to anyone looking to for a step-by-step system for improvements, whether your goal center on health, money, productivity, relationships, or all of above. As long as human behavior is involved, this book will guide you. The fundamentals: why tiny changes make a difference. Chapter 1: The surprising power of atomic habits. The fate of British cycling changed one day in 2003. The organization, which was the governing body for professional cycling in Great Britain, had recently hired Dave Bradford as its new performance director. At the time, professional cyclists in Great Britain had endured nearly 100 years of mediocrity. Since 1908, British riders had won just a single gold medal at the Olympic Games, and they had started even worse in cycling biggest race, the Tour de France. In 110 years, no British cyclist had ever won the event. In fact, the performance of British riders had been so underwhelming that one of the top bike manufacturers in Europe refused to sell bike to the team because they were afraid that it would hurt sales if other professionals saw the Brits using their gears. Brailsford had been hired to put British cycling on a new trajectory. What made him different from the previous coaches was his relentless commitment to the strategy that he referred to as the aggregation of the marginal gains, which was the philosophy of searching for tiny margins of improvements in everything you do. Brailsford said the whole principle came from the ideas that if you broke down everything you could think of that goes into riding a bike and then improve it by 1%, you will get a significant increase when you put them all together. Brailsford and his coaches begins by making a small adjustment you might expect from a professional cycling team. They redesigned the bike seats to make them more comfortable and rubbed alcohol on the tires for better grip. They asked riders to wear electrically heated overshorts to maintain ideal muscles temperature while riding and used biofeedback sensors to monitor how each athlete responded to a particular workout. The team tested various fabrics in the wind tunnel and had their outdoor riders switch to indoor racing suits, which proves to be lighter and more aerodynamic. But they didn't stop there. Brailsford and his team continued to find 1% improvements in the overlooked and unexpected areas. They tested different types of massages gels to see which one led to the fastest muscle recovery. They hired a surgeon to teach each riders the best way to wash their hands to reduce the chances of catching a cold. They determined the type of pillow and mattress that led to the best night's sleep for each riders. They even painted the insides of the team truck white, which helped them spot little bit of dust that would normally slip by unnoticed but would degrade the performance of the finely tuned bikes. As these and hundreds of other small improvements accumulated, the result came faster than anyone could have imagined. Just 5 years after Brailsford took over, the British cycling team dominated on the road and truck cycling events at the 2008 Olympic Games in Beijing, where they won the astounding 60% of the gold medals available. 4 years later, when the Olympic Games came to London, the British raised the bar as they set 9 Olympic records and 7 world records. That same year, Bradley begins to become the first British cyclist to win the Tour de France. The next year, his teammate Chris Froome won the race, and he would go on to win again in 2015, 16 and 17, giving the British team 5 Tour de France victories in 6 years. During the 10 years span from 2007 to 2017, British cyclists won 178 World Championship and 66 Olympic and Paralympic gold medals and captured 5 touted consecutive victories in what is widely regarded as the most successful run in the cycling history. How does this happen? How does a team of previously ordinary athletes transform into world champions with tiny changes that at the first glance would seem to make a modest difference at best? Why do small improvements accumulate into such a remarkable results, and how can you replicate this approach in your own life? Why small habits make a big difference? It is so easy to overestimate the importance of one defining moment and underestimate the value of making a small improvements on a daily basis. Too often, we convince ourselves that massive success requires massive action, whether it is losing weight, building a business, writing a book, winning a championship, or achieving any other goals. We put pressure on ourselves to make some earth-shattering improvement that everyone will talk about. Meanwhile, improving by 1% is not particularly notable sometimes. It is not even noticeable, but it can be far more meaningful, especially in the long run. The difference a tiny improvement can make over time is astounding. Here is how the math works out. If you can get a 1% better each day for 1 year, you will end up 37 times better by the time you are done. Conversely, if you get 1% worse each day for 1 year, you will decline nearly down to zero. What starts as a small wins and minor setbacks accumulates into something much more. 1% better every day, 1% worse every day for 1 year, 0.99 equal to 0.66. Okay. Habits are compound interest of self-improvement. The same way that money multiplies through compound interest, the effect of your habits multiply as you repeat them. This seems to make little difference on any given day, and yet the impact they deliver over the months and years can be enormous. It is only when looking back to 5 or perhaps 10 years later that the value of good habits and the cost of bad habits will make strongly apparent. This can be a difficult concept to appreciate in daily life. We often dismiss small changes because they don't seem to matter very much in the moment. If you save a little money now, you are still not a millionaire. If you go to the gym 3 days in a row, you are still out of the shape. If you study Mandarin for an hour tonight, you still haven't learned the language. You make a few changes, but the result never seems to come quickly, and so we slide back into our previous routine. Unfortunately, the slow pace of transformation also makes it easy to let a bad habit slide. If you eat an unhealthy meal today and the scale doesn't move much, if you work late tonight and ignore your family, they will ignore you. If you procrastinate and put your project off until tomorrow, there will usually be time to finish it later, as single decision is easy to dismiss. But when we repeat 1% errors day after day, by replicating poor decision, duplicating tiny mistake, and rationalizing little excuses. Our small choices compounds into toxic results. It's the same accumulation of many missteps, a 1% decline here, there, that eventually leads to a problem. The impact created by a change in your habits is similar to the effect of shifting the routine of an airplane by just a few degrees. Imagine you are flying from Los Angeles to New York City. If a pilot leaving from LAX adjusts the healing just 3.5 degrees south, you will land in Washington DC instead of New York. Such a small changes is barely noticeable. Take off, the noise of the airplanes moves just a few feet, but when magnifies across the entire United States, you end up hundreds of miles apart. Similarly, a slight changes in your daily habits can guide your life to a very different destination. Making a choice that is 1% better or 1% worse seems insignificant in the moment, but over the span of moments that make up a lifetime, these choices determines difference between who you are and who you could be. Success is a product of daily habits, not once in a lifetime transformation. That said, it doesn't matter how successful or unsuccessful you are right now. What matters is whether your habits are putting to your path towards success. You should be far more concerned with your current trajectory than with your current results. If you are a millionaire but you are spend more than you earn each month, then you are on a bad trajectory. If your spending habits don't change, it's not going to end well. Controversially, if you are broke but you save a little bit every month, then you are on the path towards financial freedom, even if you are moving slower than you would like. Your outcomes are a lagging measures of your habits. Your net worth is lagging measures of your financial habits. Your weight is lagging measures of your eating habits. Your knowledge is lagging measures of your learning habits. Your clutter is lapping measures of your cleaning habits. You get what you repeat. If you want to predict where you will end up in your life, all you have to do is follow the curve of the tiny gains of your tiny losses and see how your daily choices will compound 10 or 20 years down the lines. Are you spending less than you are earn each month? Are you making it into the gym each week? Are you reading books and learning something new each day? Tiny battles like these are the ones that will define your future self. Time magnifies the margins between success and failures. It will multiply whether you feed it good habits, make time your ally, and bad habits make time for your enemy. Habits are double-edged sword. Bad habits can cut you down just as easy as good habits can build you up. Which is why understanding the details is crucial. You need to know how habits work and how to design them to your liking, so you can avoid the dangerous half of the pallet. Your habits can compound for you or against you. Positive compounds, productivity compounds. Accomplishing one extra task is a small feat on any given day, but it counts for a lot over time. entire career. The effect of automating an old task or mastering a new skills can be even greater. The more tasks you can handle without thinking, the more your brain is free to focus on other areas. Knowledge compounds. Learning one new ideas won't make you a genius, but a commitment to a lifelong learning can be transformative. And furthermore, each book you read not only teaches you something new but also opens up different ways of thinking about old ideas. As Warren Buffett says, that's how knowledge works. It builds up like compound interest. Relationship compounds. People reflect your behavior back to you. The more you help others, the more others want to help you. Being a little bit nicer in each interaction can result in a network of broad and a strong connection over time. And negative compounding, a stress compounds. The frustration of the traffic jam, the weight of parenting responsibility, the worry of making end meets, and the strain of slightly high blood pressure by themselves. These common cause of a stress are manageable, but when they persist for years, little bit of stresses compounds into a serious health issues. Negative thoughts compounds. The more you think of yourself as worthless, stupid, or ugly, the more you condition yourself to interpret life that way. You get trapped in a thought loop. The same is true for you think about others. Once you fall into habits of seeing people as angry, unjust, or selfish, you see those kind of people everywhere. Outrage compounds. Riots, protests, and mass movements are rarely the result of a single event. Instead, a long series of microaggressions and daily aggravations slowly multiply until one event tip the scales and outrage spread like a wildfire. What progress is really like? Imagine that you have an ice cube sitting on the table in front of you, and the room is cold and you can see your breath. It is currently 25 degrees. Ever so slowly the room begins to heat up. 26 degrees, 27, 28, and the ice cube is still sitting on the table in front of you. 29 degrees, 30 and 31. Still nothing has happened. Then 32 degrees, the ice begins to melt. A 1 degree shift, seemingly no different from the temperature increases before it has unlocked a huge change. Breakthrough moments are often the result of many previous actions, which built up the potential required to unleash major changes. This pattern showed up everywhere. Cancer spends 80% of its life undetectable, then takes over the body in months. Bombo can barely be seen for 5 years as it builds extensive root system underground before exploding 90 feet into the air within 6 months. Similarly, habits often appears to make no difference until you cross a critical thresholds and unlock the new level of performance. In the early and middle stage of any quest, there is often a valley disappointment. You expect to make progress in a linear fashion, and it's frustrating how ineffective changes can seem during the first days. weeks or even months. It doesn't feel like you are going anywhere. It's a hallmark of any compounding progress. The most powerful outcomes are delayed. This is one of the core reasons why it is so hard to build habits that last. People make a few small changes, fail to see the tangible results, and decide to stop. You think, I have been running every day for a month, so why can't I see any changes in my body? Once this kind of thinking takes over, it's easy to let good habits fall by the waysides, but in order to make a meaningful difference, habit needs to persist long enough to break through this plateau, what I call the plateau of latent potential. If you find yourself struggling to build good habits and break bad ones, it is not because you have lost your ability to improve. It is often because you have not yet crossed the plateau of latent potential. Complaining about not achieving success despite working hard is like complaining about an ice cube not melting when you heated it from 25 to 30 degrees. Your work was not wasted, it is just being stored. All the action happens at 32 degrees. When you finally break through the plateau, the latent potential, people will call it an overnight success. The outside world only sees the most dramatic events rather than all the preceded it. But you know that it's the work you did long ago. When it seems that you are not making any progress that makes a jump to today possible, it is the human equivalent of geological pressure. Two tectonic plateaus can grind against one another for millions of years. The tension slowly building all the while. Then one day they rub each other once again in the same fashion they have for ages, but this time the tension is too great. The earthquake erupts. Changes can take years before it happens all at once. Mastery requires a practice. The San Antonio Spurs, one of the most successful teams in NBA history, have a quote from social reformer Jack Rice hanging in their locker room. When nothing seems to help, I go and look at the stone clutter, hammering away at his rock, perhaps 100 times without as much as a crack showing in it. Yet at the hundreds of first blow, it will split in two. And I know it was not that last blow that I did it, but all that I had gone before.